Hey, what's up, my friends? It's been a while since I've talked to you, and wanted to hurry and make a quick video. This was inspired by a Facebook comment that I got. I think it was on Friday. I had made a post that basically said how pissed I was because there's no organic restaurants in Davis County. You got to go to Salt Lake, you got to go to Ogden, whatever. So that was my gripe. And one of the comments was from a friend of mine. We actually grew up on the same street, and he's a farmer and a really good farmer, and very well respected, and obviously knows his stuff. He replied and basically said, what is the value of organic? And mentioned that some of the quote unquote organic methods are par and parcel with the more conventional means of farming. And it got me thinking. And first and foremost, I want to say this: I'm not an expert on this subject at all. I'm not going to sit here and pose that I am, but I have studied it to a certain extent, and I wanted to just share. I've written down a few points that I want to share with you. Why, above just the surface, why organic is, in my mind, a much better choice. Organic farming, even a better model would be biodynamic farming, which is considered by most even a step up from organic farming. This said, I know that some of the standards for organic are trying to become watered down at this point. I know that no herbicides, pesticides, or insecticides with certain chemicals can be used to get the USDA label for farming. And so really, I just wanted to list just a few points. If any of you want to email me and want a resource that goes in depth in this, just email me, griff@llfit.com. And Paul Check wrote an ebook that goes into depth on this subject. And I understand also, before we get into this, that depending on which side of the fence you're coming from, if you're like in a conventional farmer, you're obviously going to draw off of studies and resources that come from conventional studies. So for example, there's many government subsidized crops in the US right now, and a lot of the studies that go into conventional farming have an agenda that is tacked onto that, because obviously they want the system to work. Government subsidies, increase production, and so the public at large wants to be ensured that there's really no danger with organic versus inorganic farming, which I've always looked at it from, this is true to my nature, I always look at the opposite side of things. I like to look at things holistically. So some of the studies that I've seen from more the holistic side of things have shown just the opposite of that there is higher nutrient yields from organic crops versus those that are conventionally farmed with chemicals, harmful chemicals, toxic chemicals. And the other thing that I wanted to hit on is, really my biggest concern is the concept of monocropping versus rotating crops for the integrity of the soil. And there's a lot of studies out there that are showing the erosion of the soil, the destruction of the soil, because monocropping is a method that in nature doesn't exist. The soil doesn't have a chance to replenish itself. And because of that, it starts to become depleted of not only nutrition and nutrients, but it also starts to get depleted of other things such as humus, microorganisms, which I'll talk about in just a second. So monocropping is kind of the gorilla in the room. So from a philosophical standpoint, if we're not rotating crops and we're doing the monocropping, which I actually think he does do the rotation of crops if I remember reading his text correctly, we're taking more of a natural approach to how Mother Nature works. So that is the biggest thing for me, is making sure that we're not doing damage to our soil via the monocropping, and that could be a whole video in and of itself. The other thing is this: I come from this, when I look at organic versus inorganic, I have to use my common sense and ask myself this. Looking at chemistry and having taken chemistry and understanding how we human beings, we are an organic matter. We literally, our flesh and bone and blood is organic material. Our liver, our organs, our vital organs are an organic material. And if we look at how Mother Nature farms, i.e. there's predators and insects, that's Mother Nature's way of using itself to farm. And right now we've gone to war against Mother Nature. We've said that the insects are bad, we got to kill them. And so we've kind of waged war. Now I get, you might be thinking, well, that's the way it's got to be done. That's the only way. That's actually not true. If you look at certain biodynamic farmers and organic farmers, there's a lot of different methods that can be employed. It's going to take an entirely different paradigm regime and change, but there is different methods. It's akin to turning the Titanic. It's going to take a lot of momentum to actually get there. So from principally based and philosophically, looking at us human beings, our liver, our organs, all of this we are organic creatures, and we're meant to digest, assimilate, and become what we eat, literally. Our liver is becoming what we eat. Our brain, my eyes, my nose, all of my cells, my bodily cells are literally being formed and fashioned from the foods that I am eating. Now, if I'm taking in foods that come from conventional farming day after day, and there is inorganic compounds coming into my body. And if you go onto the FDA's website and you look at some of the approved pesticides and insecticides, fungicides, herbicides, etc., just from a common sense, and again, I have no PhD, I'm not claiming to be an expert, but just from a common sense standpoint, if you look at some of those chemicals that go into the body, that creates a big physiological load on the liver. And that's where, if you look at this from a physiological standpoint, if these toxins are entering into our body and our liver at a low level has to detoxify, that puts us into a small grade of inflammation, which affects metabolism, hormonal secretions, moods, pretty much puts a drain on the system because it's taxing our bodily resources. So the more non-organic matter we put in, not to mention what's being emitted into the air and what's going into the soil, all of this, it creates more of a burden on us. And so from a common sense standpoint, I favor food that is organic versus non-organic because it's less of a burden on our detox organs, our liver, our kidneys, our lymphatic system, etc. So it turns into a burden argument. The other thing I wrote down here is living soil versus non-living. So we've went more to a chemically based, artificial, we use chemical fertilizers with nitrogen and so forth to grow our crops, when in reality, if we look at soil by itself, there's fungi, there's bacteria, there's thousands of different strains. There's some of the fungi is called mycorrhiza, and the mycorrhiza is a fungi that grows down into the soil, and it metabolizes a lot of the humus, and some of the humus is basically just decayed plant matter and debris that the mycorrhiza will actually turn into and liquefy into nutrients, so that the plant will therefore get the nutrient, be eaten by an animal. We eat the animal, and that circle of life keeps going round and round and round. It's a biodynamic circle. It's a circle of life of dead and dying animals, plants, decaying, fungus and fungi, nature's cops, kind of cleaning up and sequestering these vitamins and nutrients, giving it to the animal, to the plant, then to the animal, then to us, and the circle goes on and on and on. This doesn't happen as much, or at least as prevalently, with conventional farming methods, because conventional farming methods actually kill off the fungi, the mycorrhiza, the microorganisms in the soil, and disrupts it. And if you're talking about monocropping again, it starts to destroy the humus layer of the earth, which that's a whole other argument, and it goes back to crop rotation. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention too is water supply. There's damage from runoff, from irrigation, where this again goes back to monocropping. And I also understand that there can be monocrops that are organic as well, and that's a problem in and of itself. Environmental damage, inorganic pesticides and herbicides, insecticides, the carbon footprint from those have been, in a lot of non-biased studies, have been shown to be greater. I know that there are industry studies that say that there's not. And again, I would say to that there is confirmation bias. Depending on if you're industry and you're drawing on sources that want to confirm that, it's going to show that. And if you look at more of the neutral studies, you're going to find that most of the time that the CO2 emissions go up. So there's environmental damage. We already talked about the humus, the layer that gets destroyed with non-organic, not only because of monocropping, but also directly from glyphosate and Roundup and all of these chemicals that are harsh on the Earth's surface. They get mixed in, they kill the mycorrhiza and everything. So it destroys this cycle, this natural cycle of life, and it takes away from how nature typically works. Now, I'm not going to go into this video because first of all, because I don't know what the solution is, and I will say that straight up. There's experts out there that have biodynamic farming methods. There's regenerative farming that they're talking about right now to regenerate that I'm really interested in. I'm listening to some podcasts on that right now. Again, this is not my area of expertise, but from a common sense and an ethical and a moral standpoint, and from being a steward of the earth, this is just where my opinion comes in. And this is not to disparage any farmer. God bless them. They're out there doing what they can. But the current system as it is right now is producing foods that are lower quality, lower nutrient yields. They're higher toxic load. There's more inflammation than we've ever had from the foods that we were eating, partially because of the toxins that we're taking in. And again, if we think about this, if we were to scale back even 500 years and look at the amount of chemicals, and you look at the absolute volumes of chemicals that are being dumped on our earth, it's in my opinion, it's sad. And you might call me, weird tree hugging or whatever. I get that I'm a lot left of center than most people think on this. I understand that. But to me, I don't think we would see that. We worked with the earth. We worked in concert with the earth. We were synergistic with the earth. We figured out that natural predators and bugs and insects were necessary, not enemies to us. And again, I'm not here to list like all the to-dos and how to do it, because I don't know. I just know that we have to get back to basics. And looking on both sides, I've looked at both the conventional side and I've looked at more of the holistic side. And I always tend, just by nature, I tend to go more towards a holistic side. And common sense usually comes through shining clear for me. If my body is taking in inorganic compounds through the foods that I'm eating, that's providing a burden that's not healthy. So there's personal, there's environmental, there's ethical reasons. We can get into climate change and CO2 emissions and all that. So like I said, if you want to go deeper into this, I know this is probably thick for most, but wanted to at least give you an idea of why I believe that organic foods are better and equate to more health in the human diet. So that is my 2 cents. Thank you so much for watching, my friends. Have a great week, and remember, life is good. Take care.